Hi, I'm Sarah from Heirloom Creations, and we have been featuring a ruler every single month at our store. And once again, we have come up with a fun collection of rulers that give you a whole new look without a lot of work. Last month, we featured a wedge ruler by Cheryl Phillips, and her recent rulers, Squedge Rulers. 3 different ones exactly, and giving you an idea, the 3 samples behind us, each one has the pattern in with the ruler. So if you like the table runners or the quilt behind me, you can get that free pattern by buying the Squedge Ruler. There's different degrees. So for example, this one here is the 22.5 Squedge Ruler. The middle one is a 15-degree Squedge Ruler, and the one on this side is an 18-degree Squedge Ruler. These blocks turn out to be 16 inches finished, and so there's some fudge room. It's actually quite easy to do as a beginner quilter. So next time you're in, take a look at these, and you'll really love what you can do and impress your friends with one of these new Squedge Rulers. The first thing we're going to do is prepare our Squedge Ruler with some of the true grip so it doesn't slide around on you. These are wonderful. As we place them, we're going to put a couple of them on both sides because this Squedge Ruler actually gets flipped. Sometimes we are cutting so we can read the writing, and sometimes we're cutting so we're working from the back side to give us the different angles. So I'm going to put a couple dots on this side and then flip it over, and I'm going to just put them right back on top of where the other ones were. And this is going to make it so it doesn't slide around when you're working with the Squedge Ruler. Okay, so now our ruler is prepped. Most of the pieces that you're going to cut, you are going to be cutting between 7.5 and an 8-inch strip. So once again, I always go to my trusty 8.5-inch wide ruler. Not a fan of this 6.5 wide because, well, it's not wide enough. So all my strips have been cut according to the patterns. Now on the Squedge Ruler, you have a couple different places we're going to cut. Sometimes I'm going to be using the lower edge. There is a middle line right through here that we'll sometimes use, and then the top line here. That's going to give us all the angles that will fan around and give us the square. When you are ready to lay your fabrics down, one thing to keep in mind is don't have them folded. Open them up and make sure you always have the right side up. Now I am going to cut 2 at a time, so this piece is right side up as well as this piece. So I always get the rights all together, and then when I switch it around, I always get the lefts or the mirror image as we start. So once we line this up, this piece we're going to start off by cutting the full distance of the Squedge Ruler. And with those helpful true grips on them, I don't have to worry about it moving around on me. So I'm just lining this up and going ahead and cutting right on through. Come across, back down. You also will have a little bit at the tip here. Move that up so you can see it. A little tip to cut. And then that will help as you line up your 1/4-inch marks. There we go. Always get that last little trim at the bottom. Okay, to do your next cut, so we're going to keep going here. All we're going to do is take our Squedge Ruler and rotate it. Line it up at the opposite end using the full cut here. And then we're going to come and cut here and all the way back down. Cut off the little tip. And now you've got your pieces that are the same as our very first cut. So just keep cutting as many as you need. Once you're ready to cut the reverse images, then you're going to take your Squedge Ruler and flip it over. So now we're going to kind of be working down from here. Line it up. And we're going to cut across and back down. Now this is where I am going to turn my mat just a little bit for safety here. There we go. And now we have the opposite edge. To repeat that cut, just line up your fabrics, keeping the Squedge Ruler, flip it around, and line it up back down at the bottom. And you're ready to make your next cut. Don't try to go too far in here because then that way you aren't cutting into your next piece. Just keep on going. Okay, so that's how we cut the first shape of the squedge square that we are making. For the second cut of the squedge ruler, we are going to use one of the lines that is marked with some openings within the ruler. So it's really easy to line it up along the edge of your fabric, be able to see through and see your raw edge, and put that right along the line to cut. So, and once again, we'll start by cutting right sides, and then we'll flip it over to do the reverse images. And you notice you can just keep putting your ruler right along the previous cut line and just keep going back and forth. Cut it there. And then we'll flip it over and cut the other remaining sides. Flip over, lining up the bottom edge, or it's not the bottom edge, it's the middle edge here. Coming around. There are so many different ways that we're going to be able to put things together. Some of the patterns that you'll see, we start off with stripped pieces together. That's what gives you almost a prism look that go into some of the other designs that are on the table runner or in other quilts. Even on Cheryl Phillips' website that you can go to, she's got print-offs that you can do and make and color in with your own colors and see what kind of variations you can have. Depending on which of the squedge blocks or squedge ruler you have, you can come up with infinite amount of color combinations and design layouts. The last cut uses the top line to line up along the edge of your cut strips. Once again, doing your rights and your lefts, and then flipping it over to get the other mirror image of this. I mentioned earlier that this is a beginner project. These pieces are fairly forgiving. They're not really deep angles. And being that it turns out to be a 16-inch square, you do have some movement when we get it all said and done. Now we're going to start building our block. As we lay down pieces from each of the piles, you're going to see that this will produce a straight line across the bottom. And that is why we get a square when we sew these all together. So that's 1/4 of the square, and then this will be the other quarter. We'll kind of start going up the side of the block. Can't imagine how many different combinations are available once you start playing with colors and placement and everything that goes with it. So then there's half of a square. As you can see, a nice big square that you're going to get. Now, just like all of the wedge rulers, you are going to end up with a circle in the center. Now, it won't be this big. It'll be only about just less than 2 inches when you're done stitching. But all you need to do is just take it to your sewing machine. I just took my pieces, lined them up at the lower edge, and because of the little extension beyond each piece, you know when and how to get your perfect 1/4 inch seam just by starting right at that little V part of your pieces. I always stitch towards the center because that was the way I was always taught. Always stitch where the grain line is going down towards the middle, then it doesn't stretch out. So I just laid my pieces, those two on top of it, those two on top of it, and just kind of started chain piecing them together and then opening them up and pressing them and then repeating. Kind of going through and stitching them like that. Next, I'm going to show you what to do with the center of the quilt. Now it's time to treat yourself to a Creative Grid 16.5-inch square, because then you can square up all your blocks and have them perfect for sewing together. So, and remember, t-shirt quilts also take a very large square. They usually cut their blocks down to about 15.5. So if you've got that planned, it is time to buy a square, but buy the 16.5 one, and then you've got it. Once you have it, you'll go, oh, I'm so glad I finally got it. Square up your blocks, and before you start sewing them together, I'm going to show you what you do for containing the circle, because there's going to be a big gap in the middle of all your wedges coming together here. Take a piece of freezer paper. On freezer paper, there is a shiny side and a dull side. The shiny side, when pressed to the back of your fabric, will kind of hold all these raw edges together. So when we go to stitch the circle on the center, it's going to help hold that and not let that stretch out of place. I haven't pulled this off yet, so I could show you how it's going to be. Once we're done or before we quilt the quilt, we'll pull out the freezer paper off the back. It's just going to tear off really easy. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to cut out your circle from your freezer paper. Once again, press it to the back side of your fabric, and then go ahead and trim about 1/4 inch all the way around your shape. The freezer paper applique method. I actually picked up the glue pin from Sew Line, and it's just kind of nice in a pin shape. Maybe it looks a little bit different than a glue stick and hide it from my young daughter, as long as she doesn't see it. Okay, kind of turns out a little bluish, so you know where you've actually marked. That's handy. And then cap goes just right back on. Then what we're going to do is just with our fingers press that over and around the edges. Kind of just do a quick once around and then come back and tap all the other middles in place. Then what I like to do is at my sewing machine, use a stitch that's almost looks like a blind hem stitch, where I can stitch with invisible thread or clear thread and just stitch that in place. Once it's stitched down, I'm going to remove the freezer paper so it's not crispy on the in the middle of my quilt. For finishing your quilts using the Squedge Ruler, it's actually quite easy. You can use a lot of straight lines with your walking foot. So if you're not a proficient free motion quilter, this is a great project because you can almost just kind of keep angling out, creating some of the extra like gem-like look within your quilting. This one here has some excellent use of variegated thread as it really helps draw your eye out and through the entire project. Thanks for watching, and join us again next month as we produce the next Ruler of the Month.